It's 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I am Kathleen. I'm a certified executive pastry chef who teaches on social media. I am bridging the gap between everything I know that professionals know and the home baker, because I've been them all. I've been self-taught. I went to school when I was in my 40s, and then I became a teacher at the college level, and I love baking and pastry. It's all I think about. I don't know why, but I can't make it stop. And I am here for home bakers to dig in. Instead of looking for the one answer or the trick or the hack or the cheat, we want to find out how things work, how ingredients function, and then every time we approach a new recipe or look at an old recipe with fresh eyes, we can break it down just by knowing what lives inside the ingredients and how they interact with the other ingredients and what lives inside the other ingredients. So it's all connected. We are the PoP Baking Club. We are a community of bakers of all different levels. We have cottage industry bakers, home bakers, beginning bakers, young people, old people, everybody in between. And we are the practice of pastry, which is practicing things while we bake that build good systems. And every day that we practice really well to the top of our game, the next day we're even a little bit better. It is through the practice that little by little you internalize good habits. And that's everything from organizing to scaling ingredients, using a digital scale and a mini scale, and taking care of your equipment, being organized, thinking ahead, reading through your recipes. All of these things together make huge changes. But if you make one little change, you will notice that your baking gets better very quickly. Sometimes it's really hard when you're a home baker or self-taught or isolated in your home, which I was for years. I had a professional kitchen in my basement at a couple different houses we lived in, and I felt very alone. So it's really good to have other people to talk to. I am going to be doing a lecture demo tonight, later, after this cookie goes in the oven. These are my notes. They live on Substack. So on my notes on Substack, they're called oatmeal cookie notes, and we are doing Torie's oatmeal toffee cookie. It's called a couple different things. Cherry chocolate chunk cookie, and so on and so forth. And on here, I talk about the history of the oat cookie, oats in general, the definition of what makes a cookie an oatmeal cookie, desired outcome, ingredient function, the synergy of the ingredients, kind of how they play together, because one ingredient doesn't just live off here on its own, it interacts and impacts others. Just like when you eat something that's smooth and creamy and cold and pair it with something warm and crunchy, those are interacting in your mouth. So we know and we understand that intuitively. I included just for fun that, you know, there are different kinds of oats. There are old-fashioned rolled oats, thick cut oats, which are often called like extra thick, or quick oats, okay? And we know instinctively when you cook oats, sometimes it can take 10 minutes and a lot of water to cook them. That's your old-fashioned oats. And sometimes it can take a minute or two, right? And when you hold them in your hand and you look at them, those oats look different. The old-fashioned oats, they retain their shape. And the instant ones are very thin, they're crushed up, and they have a lot of powder in them. So these things interact and act differently. This cookie is this is 2002. This was a printout from the marthastewart.com website. And I found out today that this video was on her TV show, Martha Stewart's TV show, in like 1997. So if you are looking up recipes, the 2002 and the 1997 recipe are a little bit different. So I am using the 2002. I am using it because this is the one I started with. It's the one that I converted to be used in a commercial setting for a 20-quart mixer, and it's the one I'm most familiar with. But as I was researching it today, I did notice that it used to have more of this and that. Now, oftentimes when they update a recipe, it can get a little confusing if you find old versions, but they were similar, small changes. However, I figured newer meant that these updates were improvements. I took this recipe, I used the baker's appendix, and I converted everything to grams. I went to the Formulator, which is on my website, The Practice of Pastry, and I input these amounts from here. I have the 20-quart mixer amounts, but I thought I would do what you guys have so you can see it. So these are the conversions for this home recipe that has cups and spoons. I converted it. It's still a home recipe. The total is 1,318 grams. That's the total batch yield that this would weigh. Still a home batch, but I decided that I wanted to bring it down to 750 grams. When I do 750 grams, and I use my nightly cookie scoop from Volrath. This is a green, number 12. This gives me a scoop of cookie dough that's around 111 grams. Okay, every cookie dough is different, but this is a drop cookie. Drop cookies are you scoop it and you drop it. They have similar moisture across the board if you're comparing apples to apples, but it's not a wet cookie, it's not a rollout cookie. You know that I scoop it and freeze my cookies after a rest in the cooler. All right, so what I did, if you go to the Formulator, these are the ingredients in the order in which we are going to use them: the butter, sucrose, brown sugar, and so on and so forth. This particular recipe uses all-purpose flour, and these are the amounts that are adjusted automatically when I took the total yield from 100% down to 57%, which gives me a total batch weight of 750 grams. Now over here are all my baker's percentages. Baker's percentage is designed for all of the ingredients to be relative to the flour. So where this is useful and where I am leaning into now with the teaching is when you compare one cookie to another or one recipe to another. So I often make these baker's percentage comparison charts, and each one of these is a different recipe, a column, and then across are my ingredients, and these are all oat cookies. This is how I compare one oat cookie to the next. And tonight I have 4 cookies that are going in the oven. 1, the cookie we're making now. It'll be my tester right out of the bowl. 2, the same recipe that's in the freezer that went through the hydration and resting process. 3, a King Arthur oatmeal cookie with chocolate chips, and then I did an oat cookie from the 6th Street that's got creme fraiche in it and raisins. So these are all a little different. If you are interested at all in understanding your recipe better, why did it go wrong? Punch it into the Formulator and punch a different recipe that you love, that's easy and doesn't get messed up, easy to follow, executes well, and you have really good results 99% of the time, and start to look and compare the percentages. When I have a gray box, it means that ingredient was not used in that recipe. So the highlights of this recipe, it's just egg, there is only baking soda, 64% oats, and there are no raisins in it. There are dried cherries, chocolate, a bittersweet, and toffee chips. But if you look at the King Arthur recipe, it has egg yolk in it. It also has baking powder and some salt. So tonight's recipe does not have salt in it, which is amazing, right? That's just something to clock into. Tonight's recipe is 64% oats. The King Arthur is 41%. And in order to be considered an oatmeal cookie, which really became a cookie that started out as like the healthy alternative to a chocolate chip cookie, you want to be between baker's percentage 40 and 50% oats. You can go higher than that, but to be an oatmeal cookie and not just a cookie with oats, it should be 40% baker's percentage or higher. So the next recipe I did was the 6th Street, and that recipe has just eggs and no sucrose, which is interesting. Baking powder and soda and a good dose of salt. The oats are 93%. So how is that going to look? What does 94% oats look like in real life compared to 41 or 64? And then the final one is one of my favorite cookies is the golden raisin oatmeal cookie with white chocolate chips. And it is in my link tree and it is fabulous. But you have to make it right. It's made with an extra long creaming phase, which is like 7 to 9 minutes versus 5 to 7. And you have to bake it till you get like brown, a little brown. You got to get a little Maillard because otherwise it's just super sweet. So if you think a cookie is too sweet, you need to bake it longer, because as you bake it longer, you take just sweet, which is sort of a top flavor, and you create new flavors from the sugars and the egg and the proteins that live in the flour and whatnot. So all of these are oat cookies. I wasn't even excited to do oat cookies when everyone started asking me about them. But as it always happens, as I get into the numbers, as I actually bake them and take a look at the recipes, I find complexity and interest and intrigue in the recipe, and it's been really fun. And I absolutely think that oats require a good bake, because oats have a lot of protein. If you are trying to lower your cholesterol, get more fiber in your diet, have insoluble fiber, the kind that soaks everything up. They're high in protein. It's one of the grains that's really good for you. That protein, in the presence of sugars and other things in the oven, gets the Maillard reaction. So you can either use really thick or the slow cooking oats, which will retain their shape, but they'll soak up a ton of moisture. And that moisture is coming from the butter and the eggs, some in the brown sugar. So if you use something like the quick oat, you can do that. But you are going to get oats that get more integrated with the flour. They aren't going to have that structure, but you can still bake them till you get flavor. So if you want a really nice, sturdier, chewy cookie, you're going to go for a thicker oat, but you're going to need a longer creaming phase to get a little more spread. You're going to bake on a lower temperature, and you're going to make sure that they get hydrated. Otherwise, you'll just be eating dry, raw, inaccessible oats. If you use quick oats, you're going to get more spread automatically. You're going to have to be careful how much you mix it, and it's going to hydrate a lot faster. All of these things are going to change your final outcome, so it's fascinating. I'm gonna do a quick fit check. I'm in my comfy clothes. First, I'm going to pull my hair back, and then I'm gonna come back and do my fit check, and then we'll get started, okay? Okay. Hang on. Okay, get an apron. No nail polish, no fake fingernails, no jewelry. My hair is up. I have on my apron, it's nice and tight. I wear them once, it's clean. I don't touch it. It's meant to keep my outfit clean. Everything that I wear is safe for the kitchen, and it's meant to keep me from being, I'm not in a fashion show. I'm a baker, okay? And then I wear clogs. These are super safe, and I like to stay safe. And I want everyone else to stay safe. Being in the kitchen requires a certain amount of focus and dedication to a good outcome. That is the truth. I'm gonna wash my hands really quick. I actually did not bake today, but I'm going to sanitize my surface just to make sure. Sanitation of all the ingredients, caring for the ingredients as they're scaled, making sure that everything is safe, keeps your friends and family safe. It is, it's practice, and it's really about caring. If we care, we will do better. It's not a show. Ingredients are very expensive. I am incredibly aware of the people right now who can't even bake because it's too expensive. And I don't think what I'm doing is frivolous. I think it's important. If people are going to spend their money on ingredients, they should know what they're doing. They should get a good outcome. But quite honestly, ingredients are very expensive. And to act like it's an endless supply of vanilla and other things is not fair. So we show in my kitchen respect for the ingredients, respect for the equipment, respect for the process, and for the people who are going to be eating our food eventually. So let's start by going through my ingredients that I have scaled in advance, and I am going by the center number. These are the original numbers, but I converted it down to 750 grams total, and you'll even notice how small of an amount this is. And I think this is great because the Formulator allows you to control waste. If you don't want some random number, which is what recipe developers do, you can control how many. So these are my little quarter sheet trays, and on them I have a Silpat, okay? I get these at Restaurant Depot. I like buying them in person because then you can make sure they're not dinged. And it's a good weight. You don't want to get too lightweight because they'll bend. So I have a little Silpat in here. I'm going to take out of the freezer 3 frozen cookies. And I'm going to put them on here so I can slack them so that when I am done mixing this cookie, all 4 can go in the oven at the same time. This is my freezer. And I already went through and organized so I can grab the 3 quickly. It's always smart to think ahead before you go and open your freezer. My freezer is very hardworking. We'll start with the oats. King Arthur. I'm going to put 1 on the sheet tray, and this is going to go into the oven this way. So I put the identifying piece of tape like that, and then I'm just going to put this over here, and that's slacking, literally. That is how we slack. And this is the oat cookie with the creme fraiche. And it should be said that these are both made with all-purpose flour. And I say that because my oatmeal with golden raisin and white chocolate chips is made with bread flour. There's a reason it is, and it gets a very long creaming phase, which gets a lot of air cells. Then this is the Tories, and I've got the date on there. So this is the Tories I made on the 5th of September. I like to get the kind when I scoop them out that have the craggies and all the extra stuff. That's my fave. So I have a Tories frozen and a Tories fresh. And the fresh is the one that I'm gonna make right in front of you. These go back in the freezer, and then this is slacking. So if I look at the time, it's 6:28. I can kind of tell how long they'll be slacking. An oatmeal cookie, if you wanted to spread, because sometimes they can be tight, it's nice if you allow them to slack a little bit longer. So when I would work in an environment with multiple types of cookies, pulling frozen for the day, because every day, Fridays you might have 5 dozen of one kind, and on a Monday you only have a dozen that sell. I would pull oatmeal first, then the chocolate chip cookie, then peanut butter, because peanut butter has a lot of fat, so it's soft anyway. All right, so those are slacking. This is me slacking. I'm slacking off. We will start with the theme of the evening is the creaming method. And a lot of people reach out to me and say, why was my cookie greasy? My first question is, was it a brown butter cookie? How did you brown the butter? Blah, blah, blah. But the second thing is, if you are not paying attention to time and temperature when you cream something, and when I say attention, I mean none of this is something that you throw into the bowl. It's doing things that result in a cookie that is edible but not excellent. And you certainly haven't done anything intentionally or as a practice. So when we look at the creaming method, we are trying to take fat and sugar, cut air cells into the fat, which should be pliable and room temperature, and then at some point we'll be adding liquid and then flours or dries. These things all need to be cohesive, and we need to get emulsification. And whenever you've made something like this and you just throw everything in and it's got lumps and clumps and it falls apart and it doesn't come together smooth and it's broken, you are not going to have as delicious of a final product. So that's why we want to go one thing at a time and literally contemplate every ingredient that we use. For this cookie, you could use a European butter, which I am. I'm using Plugra, I think, which is 82%. I don't like keeping multiple types of butter or fats in my kitchen, so I just use unsalted European butter. Then I know, unless it's a special project. If you're using an American butter, go ahead. With an oat cookie, that extra water, which is quite significant, is going to hydrate. And with a cookie where hydration is slow, meaning it migrates from your eggs and your butter very slowly to the other ingredients and irregularly because your oats are really thirsty. So they're hogging it from the sugars, which are normally the hog, and they're hogging it from the flour, which needs it, right? Even though we've offset the flour with oats and they don't really meld together, it kind of dilutes the flour. Everyone still needs to get their moisture. So if you were to use American butter, this is a type of recipe where that might benefit. All right, so we have 129 grams of butter. Sucrose is our sugar. So we have fat, that's our category, which is butter. And we have our sugars. One is sucrose, table sugar, it's white. And then we have brown sugar. And this is 94 grams. And I am looking at my recipe and comparing it. When I do this, I am checking my work. I am physically saying these are going to go here, and then I go on to the next thing. These are my creaming method fat and sugars off to the side. And then I have egg, 28 grams of egg. I crack an egg, I stir it up, and then I weigh out 28 grams. And this will last up to 7 days in the refrigerator, just like this. And as it sits, actually, you can see the water kind of separate out. You can see how much water with your eyes lives in an egg. And that's really good information to have, because an egg isn't just an egg. It's water and emulsifiers and proteins and fat and beautiful lecithin, wonderful stuff. And then I have vanilla, and look how little, 2.3 grams. That's vanilla bean paste. It's right on the bottom. So when I take this out, I'm gonna scrape it right in the middle and get all of it, which is great. Then we have our dries. This recipe calls for all-purpose, 107 grams. And then for the baking soda, 2.9, and I use my mini digital scale for this. Baking soda, no baking powder in this recipe. So think about why. Why do some oat cookies have baking powder and soda. And then we have the oats, which are 68 grams. All right, so we have our dries, and then we have our inclusions. And I've already chopped up my chocolate. So for the dried cherries, the number is 73 grams. What you're also looking for is the lack of sugar in the making of the dried fruit. I like the color. The bright red is a really beautiful pop of color in a very beautiful, well-textured cookie. If you only have sweetened cherries, because a lot of the ones you get at the grocery store have a lot of sugar in them, but you can get them unsweetened. Look for words like tart. The tartness is really great because it offsets the sweetness, because there's a lot of sweetness in this cookie. We have a lot of sugar, that's sweet, and then we have the cherries, which we hope bring in a little tartness, and then we have bittersweet chocolate. Now I brought this number down a tiny bit. In the original recipe it was a little bit higher, but when I've made it a lot, it felt like too much of the chocolate, but this is bitter. And again, we look at how everything works together. We have the nuttiness of the oats, that are going to give us a nice toasty oaty flavor. And then we have the tartness of the cherry, the sweetness and nice balance of the sugars. So we want bitter chocolate. So this is not a chocolate chip. You are welcome to use a chocolate chip. The difference is chocolate chips kind of hold their shape, and so it doesn't matter flavor-wise which ones you use. A real chocolate's going to melt in the oven and then relax. It's not going to stay and then solidify the way a chocolate chip does. And then finally, we have 88 grams of toffee pieces. Basically, what you're looking at is an equal amount of the three inclusions. So if you want it, just like with granola, you could look at these things and do a little bit different. You could change the profile. If you want it to be sweeter, a milk chocolate, or you want something fun, like something different, then you can switch the dried fruit, no problem. The toffee gets into an interesting conversation because the last ones that I made were the kind, the Heath Crunch bar, where it's got milk chocolate around it. So that cookie is really sweet. This is just the toffee pieces, which I love. They're hygroscopic, very sensitive to getting chewy. So they might start out crunchy, go in your cookie crunchy, but they could turn a little more toffee and chewy-like. When you are looking at the creaming method, you want to make sure that your butter is room temperature, well, around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to check it with the thermometer, but you don't want it to be too cold, because then it'll be hard and it won't take on the sugars, and the sugars won't be able to cut into it and make air holes. And the air holes, the air cells, are what you make in the bowl is the only ones you're going to get, and those later fill up and make your cookie rise. So the air cell development, paddling it with a paddle on your mixer, is mechanical leavening. Mechanical, natural, and chemical. Chemical is our baking soda. Also, if it's too warm, you end up with sort of a greasy, unstructured butter that can't really hold air. And so it's the opposite effect. So there is a sweet spot. If it's too cold, you need to warm up your bowl, but don't melt it. And with everything I just said, it explains why when you try to microwave your butter to soften it versus just planning ahead and taking it out of the refrigerator in the morning when you head off for work, so it can be room temp when you get home, or even overnight, it's not going to hurt it. When you put it in the microwave and it melts like inside and in the middle, you've broken the emulsion, you've changed the recipe, and if your cookie turns out greasy or strange, you don't have to wonder. There's no judgment. You just say, I understand, I melted the butter, even if it was just a little bit, because it melts from the inside out, which is weird. Okay, so let me take the temperature. I have my handy dandy thermometer set to Fahrenheit. And as I said, this should be around 70 degrees. You hold this in the air, it tells you what the temperature. So in this room, 74 degrees. The butter, and it's been out since around noon, I would say, is 71 degrees. So we have a good temperature on the butter. The bowl is cold, so even if you put nice room temperature pliable butter into here, the bowl might turn it firm. And so you keep an eye on these things. I like to get the butter going. You don't want to just dump everything in and just go on low. In this process, you have temperature of the butter. You also have time. I have all the time in the world. I don't need to hurry up and put this on anything higher than medium. This entire process is done on low to medium, medium to low. I don't do hardly anything on high, and I think that most of the problems people have when they whip egg meringues, when they whip cookies, when they whip cakes and do things, they're going too fast. And it's such a good thing to know because it's an easy problem to solve. And you can even see how as it starts to soften up, this is light in color and that's yellow and hard. So I'm going to scrape this off the middle and scrape, scrape. Scraping your bowl is a great thing to do because you're not overworking anything. You're just gently incorporating things. So now the firm stuff that I moved out of the way is getting incorporated. So then I will add the sugars just a little bit at a time. You can hear it start to make noise as soon as the grains hit it. Then I'll add another third, toggle it quickly. That just kind of shakes stuff off and then put that one in. So I'm just going to put a little bit in here, but this is nice, soft brown sugar. It's light brown sugar. And when you think about flavor and building flavor, you could take this up to a dark brown sugar, but how is that flavor going to impact everything else? This is a beautifully balanced flavor profile. So if you were to do that, you'd have to justify why. Maybe it's just because you like it. That's fine. Also, I think that it's fun to do different tests and to try different things because you know more about how dark brown sugar versus light brown sugar tastes when you work with it and you taste it on the regular, and then you can make a decision. I love dark brown sugar in everything, but if a recipe calls for light, I start there. So this is how sugar and butter starts out. It's hard. It's almost challenging to wipe it off the bowl with the paddle, and it sticks. It stays. That's how cold it is. If I were to paddle this really high, I might even break the emulsion of the butter. I might even knock the water out of the fat. So you don't want to use speed to get your butter where it needs to go. You want to use time, patience, and temperature. So I'm going to turn that up to medium and then go on to my next step, which is to sift the dries. I always sift my dries unless I'm doing yeast dough. This is my tammy. I sift the all-purpose flour. And you're not just doing the sifting to get the lumps out, because sometimes things end up with lumps. We're doing it to incorporate and to leaven, to add a little bit of lightness. So you're going toward cohesion and airiness. Everything that you do adds up to where when one person makes a cookie, everyone says, oh, that was good, thanks. And other people are like, oh my gosh, they're so good. Like, what did you do? Because it's just next level. And I sift onto a parchment so that I can lift it and get it into my bowl easily. I'm going to take the oats and I'm going to put them on top of my dries because they will go in with it on low, but obviously I can't sift it. So there are lots of different creaming methods depending on your ingredients. The person who writes the recipe is going to determine if after this fat part you are going to add liquids, the eggs, or if you have milk or creme fraiche and these sorts of things. So a lot of times after you've creamed the fat and sugar, you add the egg and maybe the vanilla, and then the dries, alternating with the wets. Part of what the recipe developer is trying to mitigate is the emulsifying. So if you add too much liquid, if it's cold, you're going to get this splashing and you're going to have a broken emulsion. So what we want to do is to not stress out the mixing. We want every bit to be a little bit at a time, to be room temperature, because like likes like, but same temperature likes the same temp, not cold and warm. And then we end on low with the dries barely combining, and then our inclusions, and we're done. That's a cookie. So the longest part is the creaming phase on the fats and the sugars. And where molasses goes in or other things that help make your cookie whatever it is determined by the recipe developer, and it's in service of getting things lightened, emulsified, cohesive, and ready to be baked so that you get the best outcome. If every single step is excellent, you'll get an excellent cookie. I put all of my ingredient tapes over here. I have a problem, I can compare my recipe. So let's take a look at what's going on in here. You can tell that's just medium. It's not even a fast medium. You can see in the center of my paddle that there is a remnant of the original stuff, and you can tell it's sticking to the side of the bowl. And it's lighter, which means it's got oxygen in there. It's lighter. But I think because it's an oat cookie and because I am using thick oats, I'm going to go a little bit longer. And I'm not going to go faster. And I'm going to use patience. Meanwhile, this whole time, and it's been 20 minutes, my cookies are over there slacking. So we're getting really close. Because when I use my green scoop to do 6 cookies, I do one right out of the bowl, and then everything goes in the refrigerator. The second one is at 24 hours, 36, 48, 72, and then frozen. I get 6 cookies, 6 recipe testing points of information that I can determine, did I like it the best at 24 hours? Sometimes an oatmeal cookie doesn't need as long of a rest as a chocolate chip cookie. So maybe 24 is the sweet spot for this one, but that oatmeal cookie that had the creme fraiche needed longer. I don't know. I'm going to scrape it one more time, and then I'm going to add the egg. I will show you how this already, you remember when it's stuck, it's not sliding off like a wet batter, but that could not have happened earlier. That is air. And if you allow all of the batter to accumulate around the edge of your bowl, first of all, it's colder on the edges, but all of those air cells are trapped there. So you need to scrape it at least 3 times during this process and get everything back in there. If you don't have a torch and you need to warm up the bowl, use a hot towel or just your hands. Depends on how cold they are. If your butter is cold, you need to plan ahead. I don't recommend putting it in the microwave. I don't recommend a lot of the things. If you cube your butter when you scale it, it's got more surface area. Put it in a plastic insulated bowl versus a cold metal bowl. It will warm up. Find a warm spot in your house and leave it alone. Find something else to do. Because this part's short. I mean, you could do this. This whole thing will take 20 minutes and then you can go to bed. You don't have to bake the first one. You can just get them in the fridge. This is my vanilla bean paste. See how thick it is? I'm going to scrape up everything from the middle. I try to get as much as I can. And I put it on the paddle and scrape the paddle. A lot of times in my videos you don't see the scraping. I edit it out for time, but I scrape a lot because when you're scraping, you're not overworking things. You're kind of helping everything get integrated without overdoing it. So time and temperature with the creaming method are so important. And the way that you cream something, whichever one stage, reverse creaming, I mean, there's so many. I think there's like 6 different ways. There is not one right way all the time, and every time you have to assess what your recipe is so that you know. So I'm going to put my spatula there. I'm going to pull the lids and my ingredient labels off of my containers. I mean, this cookie is so delicious, and I know I've been making it since 1997. I'm pretty sure. So if you want to use a spatula, you can, but it is if you have a machine, and you can do this with a hand mixer, just don't go fast to get the same result. Go slow. It's going to take twice as long. The paddle is designed to scrape like that around the edges and clean everything up, and then when you're doing that, it just automatically gets to the bottom. You just need to make sure there's nothing hiding in there. Now I'm going to add the eggs in 3s. Even though I have this tiny amount, this is not very much. I'm still going to, well, I guess I can add it in 2s, it's pretty small. And so this is obviously not going to get cohesive right away, so you're going to give it a sec. And it is coming. This is all ready. So that tells me that the temperature in there was good. Because as soon as that egg went in there, it really, you know, just didn't really go in, but just give it 5 seconds, toggle it up to a high speed for 1 second, and you're good to go. So then I'm going to add this egg, and once it's kind of incorporated a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and put the rest in. You need to scrape everything all the time. All the ingredients. All right. Scrape. You really just want to get your eyes on it and get things moved around. There's no right way. You don't have to go crazy. All right. Put it back on one. And we already aerated, so we don't need to continue aerating. But I'm going to scrape, and then I am going to add the flour in thirds. The first addition's usually the largest. You shoot for the last one being the smallest. And I will scrape a little bit. But the amount of time that you spend mixing in the flour is very brief. I like to keep my bowl very clean. I believe that if anyone touches it, they shouldn't get anything sticky on their hands. So you want to pick a pull-off point or one spot where you're going to work from. That's when I start scooping the cookies. I always pull off from one spot. Again, these things, does it completely change the outcome? Does it make a different cookie? No, but I don't know, it adds up. Okay, so that looks good to me. So I am going to take my baking soda, oats, and all-purpose flour, and I'm going to put a third in. And I'm just going to go like this. Doesn't even need to be scraped crazy. You're just moving it around. Just kind of folding it in. And when you do this, like with a lot of things, you're kind of looking, you're getting an eye on what's going on. Instead of running it, I'm going to leave it, and then I'm going to put the next third in. And it's getting drier. And this is definitely where you want to check the bottom. So you can see that there are dry bits in the bowl. Oh, lighting is so bad. So I'm going to go ahead and scrape this around. And again, you're not trying to stir it. You're just making sure to get things off the bottom and give them a chance to move around. I'm going to give it just a second. And it's amazing how little mixing it is. And I'm going to put the last bit in here. And I'm going to scrape. It's a lot drier. This is basically your cookie. And when you determine whether or not to leave the mixer on when you add your inclusions, think about, are you going to crack them, smush them, diminish them in a way that you don't want. So I can do either with these. I can fold them in, or I can use the paddle. If this were in a 60-quart mixer, I would recommend that they go on a paddle on low and not for long. But when you are scooping a large batch of cookies, you do not want to, you see how there's dry on there? You do not want to find out when you get to the bottom that there are no inclusions. So you do need to make sure that if you are going to mix something, that you have double checked that there is complete dispersion, that you're not leaving things behind. That's why I don't mind doing it on the mixer, but you just turn it on for a second, let it stop, you don't get momentum, and you just go slow. All right, so it is mixed, and I think I'll just pour these in and show you how I do it this way. So these will all go in. It all depends on what you're adding. And if it's delicate and you don't want it to get banged up. And with these, it's okay. So I'm going to toggle it like this. And bring it all the way to a stop. And then I go, that's it. And then I will fold it. So really you're just kind of getting them started, doing a little bit of the arm work. And it's not a big deal with a small batch like this. I could have absolutely folded them in. But if you are getting into big batches, and don't forget, these cookies, all of them, are infinitely scalable. All should be able to go as up and down as you like them. These cookies should be able, if you've got you can do anything with them. This cookie is good to go. These recipes are ready for business. And if you do you have a big 8-quart, a 10-quart, 12-quart, 20-quart mixer, you should be able to do enough of these cookies that they go in the freezer that you can pull them out to bake them as needed. If you have a coffee shop, you have a cafe, and the size of the cookie scoop is irrelevant. You should be able to use any size cookie scoop. It's only going to affect the baking time, not the temperature, the time. So here's our cookie. Lots and lots of inclusions. And that's what makes this cookie a lot of fun. It makes it very pretty. And I would highly suggest that if you want to alter this cookie, just think about color, texture, and profile. I'm going to move this out of the way, and we are getting into being able to hang out and see what happens. You're going to roast 4 cookies with me. We're going to roast them together, and I'll check on them. Move this out of the way. Okay, so I have this adorable little pan. This is an 1/8 sheet pan. And I'm going to scoop my cookies. So I always have one spot where I pull off. There we go. And I'm going to pull up all my ingredients. We have everything in here. I know it's good. It doesn't taste good or something goes wrong. I don't know. I can always look these up, but for now, we're good. And I should get 6 cookies out of here. Now, I like to scoop generously. And if you're in a kitchen where you're having someone scoop a lot of cookies, there might be a variance of one to 2 cookies per person. We all scoop differently. With a cookie that's a little sticky like this, I don't take my hand and push it. If it's dry, you can do this, all day. But for this one, I'm going to scrape it up the side of the bowl so that that cookie dough rolls through and fills it up. Because what you can do is if you're just surfacey, you end up with a gap. And if you roll it in, you get a nice, tight, nice cookie. So I'm going to make sure it's got, I like it when it's big. I like it to go over the edge. And you start closest to you and work going away. 2. And if you notice that the inclusions aren't everywhere, then scrape around. Make it right. If I had whipped these for too long and incorporated too much air, I would have more batter and more dough, and that might be an indicator that I whipped it too much. So here are my little guys. I'm going to stick these in the refrigerator so that I can wrap them up in a plastic bag, and then tomorrow I can bake one at the 24-hour mark. But they can't go in the refrigerator unwrapped for long. Like, I'll leave them in there for a little while tonight, and then we'll be bagging them because otherwise they'll dry out. Here is my little sheet tray. So this one is going to get a sticker on it that says Torie's Fresh. This is fresh out of the bowl. And I think I have a little bit extra. So those of you out there that have this recipe, if you want, you can make it a tiny bit smaller. Just a little bit. We'll leave it. I'll figure out something to do with that. I'll maybe add it to the bottom. If you're going to take extra dough, do not add it to the top, add it underneath. But I don't really like to do that. I would rather take that guy and bake it separately and play with it than adjust the amount and weight on all my other perfect cookies because it's kind of silly. All right, so I'm going to put these here. These have been slacking now, my gosh, for 35 minutes. These are my cookies. This is my kosher salt. And I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of salt on the cookie raw. When you do it raw, it gives time for the salt to connect to the dough. The moisture in the dough is going to allow it to dissolve, and that's why if you're using a Malden or a really flaky salt, which I love, it's a good time to do it while it's raw, not after it's baked. And you don't want to come in real close. You want to be above because what we're trying to do is get a nice dispersion of salt. We're not trying to like get a clump of it. And a good amount, there we go. My kosher salt, and then these are going in the oven. Typically, I don't like to put a lot in the oven, but we're doing it tonight because we're having fun. I'll carry these over and then I'll show you putting them into the oven. They are going on a single sheet tray. This is one sheet tray with a silpat. 3 frozen that slacked. 1 fresh out of the bowl. And we'll be able to compare the results and take notes. And that is recipe testing. So if you want a recipe developed, that's what you need to do. So I'm going to work quickly. My oven is at 350, and you can leave the tape right on here. So I'll show you how I work. Ready? Go. I have separated out the shelves so we get maximum airflow. There we go. Everybody see? Ta-da! That's it. And now the magic is I put this on 8 minutes and then I double pan them and I turn the oven down. And that is it. Now we can talk. We have 8 minutes. We'll go check on them and then we'll double pan and we'll take a look. And we have our dough in the refrigerator, which I will bag with a half sheet bun bag labeled. You'll not remember the name of what you're working on or the date. So it's important to write directly on the parchment or onto the bag or onto painter's tape. So we are teaching. This is educational baking. You can learn more from learning how to make a simple muffin cake or cookie than you can from any fancy recipe. It's foundational information and it's transferable. Once you learn this, you can read the next recipe and all you need to know are the ingredients, how much, and the creaming method. Period. You already know. You know how to do it. I double pan all my cookies at 8 minutes, and this is just something I've developed. If you want to recipe test these cookies, you can. This cookie does not need to be roasted. You could do it at 350 for 15 minutes or whatever it is. You could use convection, lower it to 325 and do it for 12 minutes. It all depends on your oven, your mixing method, your ingredient choices, because there are a lot of moments I made ingredient choices with the oats, with the brown sugar, with the flour. These are decisions. I didn't use extract, I used vanilla bean paste. So I'm going to double pan it because oat cookies tend to be tight. Haven't you ever seen them like hockey pucks, which I like, but they're kind of underbaked. In order to get spread, you need to get them on a silpat, lower the temp, let them melt out, slack them long enough that they do it, give them a nice hydration phase. And then once it's to, 8 minutes, you'll notice. I don't go in there and look and make a huge determination. I know that the bottom of that cookie is going to be brown enough. I don't want it to keep going because I don't want to overbake. I don't want the exterior baked and the interior raw. So I am going to turn the oven down to like 310. And I do it different all the time. And some of that's just intuition and it's the weather and my oven. And then I open the door, open and close. And then I check it again in, let's say 10 minutes because we're here. I tend to overbake things when I'm here because I don't pay attention. It's important to retain the emulsion because every step that you take is getting you to a cohesive, finished product. If your cookie is crumbly, greasy, not moist, I don't know, what are some other bad things? But it's not it doesn't brown properly, you have patches, maybe you have lumps of things. It's just not gonna be as good. And sometimes you can see it. It's about getting at every stage all of the ingredients cohesive, working together because baking is about what's happening at the unseeable level. Okay, you don't normally see that there's water in your eggs unless it separates out. You don't normally see that there's water in your butter until you melt it and then refrigerate it, and then you see the water sitting on top. So it's important. Butter is an emulsion. It is an emulsion. That's what's happening. It's all these ingredients being held together by this beautiful natural emulsion. So when you bake, when you do meringues, when you do a sponge cake, when you make literally everything, you are emulsifying. And that is the difference between scratch baking and stuff that you get in a box and all the mixes and all of the bases that they use in bakeries. Those are full of chemical emulsifiers and they do the work of the trained baker. So you can either be trained and know how to emulsify and know the rules of emulsification and how to take your time and go slow, or you can just buy ingredients that do it for you. And I'll tell you what, when they got rid of hydrogenated fats, the baking industry flipped out. They didn't even know how to bake. They all found out collectively they actually didn't know how to bake. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. Turn off my timer. Now, when I do this, I do not want to bang my cookies to the point where I deflate them. What I'm going to do is pull these out of here, and I'm leaving the oven open on purpose because I want the heat to come out. All of these have spread. You can see a little bit of brown on the bottom. So this was a frozen one. See how this one's frozen and the inside's thicker? See how it's higher? That I like. I personally like this. This was frozen, but it's spread out more and not quite as thick in the middle. That was frozen as well. And then this is the one that came out of the bowl. See how much wider it is? Okay, let me look at the temperature. I have an oven thermometer. Okay, I think that's a good temp. So I'm gonna turn the oven down. I'm gonna do 310. I'm gonna check it in 8 minutes. That will give us a total of 16 minutes, which is a good marker. And we're looking at the same things over and over and over again. It never changes. That's why if you keep things the same, you can get to your desired outcome so much faster. It's not about right and wrong, or the wrong ingredient or the right ingredient. It's about what is your desired outcome. You want a thin and crispy cookie? Do you want one that's chewy and thick? Do you want it super sweet and soft, or do you want it crunchier? Do you want texture? Like, I love the texture and the flavor, but not necessarily, even though I love this cookie, not necessarily all of the cherry and the chocolate and the toffee. Like, so what is your desired outcome? And then you can see automatically what happens. And we'll go look at it again. The spread, the thickness in the center, the darkness of the bottom, the color of the top. All of these things are the result of the mix, the temperature of the dough, the temperature of the ingredients as I mix them, and then the oven and my tools for baking them. And then when they're done, they're not even done. You have to pull them out and you have to cool them properly, and not in a breeze. They should be slowly allowed to come together. I personally like leaving cookies on the pan so they can re-solidify, but we often, if we're eating them, they go on a cold plate. I like it to shock it a little bit and it's warm and comes together. But think about in the industry, and this is not to say that if, well, I'm not the industry and I'm a home baker and I don't want to do it like in the industry. The industry is not about making things different or better. People say bakery style. I'm like, what is a bakery style cookie? Like, good? Basically, you are looking at managing a higher volume of the exact same thing. And when people stand and look in an oven at a commercial place, and someone says, I'm done with such and such a temperature, and we know what the next temp needs to go. Everyone's working together to drive that oven. We're all trying to get to the same result. Well-baked, desired outcome, within the realm of what will sell, what most people will like, and what tastes good. And then you get into personal preference, okay? That's why you go into one place and you love their sugar cookie because it's super soft. And then you go into another one and you like it because it's crispy. That's where your personal preference comes in. Every cookie, when I make a batch, I've dialed it in, unless I'm testing, which is pretty much every day. But if I had a bakery, I would know exactly how long they needed to rest in the fridge, how long. Once they go in the freezer, it ceases. It's not a problem. They stay in there less than 4 months, I'm good to go. And then I know which types of cookie. So you start to generalize and be specific. I'm gonna open up the oven. And with the roasting method, when you're on a lower temperature, it's not as imperative that it's hot because you're slowly roasting it. And at this point, don't ask me how long, don't ask me, I don't know, until it's the right color, and they'll all be different. And I'm gonna switch some of these around to transfer a little bit of the heat. I'm actually liking this Torie's right out of it. Look at how big it's spread. Oh, these are all, I'm a lucky person. I get to eat more cookies. Recipe testing. See, this is just an excuse to eat. So I do the one right out like I did, out of the bowl. And then I do 24 hours. That's refrigerated. That's not frozen. But I take notes. I write down, like, and it's funny how the same thing persists. 36, 70, 48, 72. And then the frozen one. At some point, even though those are refrigerated, they're not frozen, I always take it to the 72 and then freeze it because the freezing is less relevant. That is for production. It's to create cookies you can bake nightly. It's to create a system where you don't have to make a whole batch of cookies and eat it all right. People are like, I can't wait to eat them. Well, eat one. Eat one and get the rest in the fridge. But I'm okay because I always do it the same. Those refrigerated ones, I'm okay accepting they're not frozen because I can suss out spread, texture, color, flavor. I can suss stuff out and it goes straight from the fridge to the oven. There's no slacking out of the fridge. And I know how much does it because that's going to impart how long I slack them, which is fascinating. I have 2 peanut butter cookies in there right now. One is going to get slacked a lot longer than the other because one spreads much faster. I don't think I put the timer on again. Let me double check what's going on here. Spend 30 years working on focus and then it's out the door. All right, let's see. That's why it being on 310 is okay. And I like to go dark, so I know some of you are going to be like, it's too dark. That's not done in the middle. See how it's light? This one's looking, oh my gosh, that's looking pretty darn good, man. Too light in the middle. This one's getting really brown. This is the King Arthur, but I'm gonna keep going. Dave and I ate these 2 days in a row. Oh, look at that craggy guy. I like that, the Torie's frozen. So this is the Torie's fresh, and this is the Torie's frozen. Can you see? We'll get it in a good light and take a look, but I want this to be browner. I like an old cookie that's got brown on it. So I'm gonna give it 4 minutes. I don't wanna go too long, and I am gonna set the timer. The timer tells you something's in the oven, not when something's done. All right, so when you're looking at cookies, you can't tell if they're done or not unless you pull them out. So this one looks pretty dark. I'm gonna pull it out. This one is also nice and dark. I'm gonna pull it out. You have to pull it out of the oven because you can't tell just looking in. This one looks the best. And then here's the Torie's frozen. I'm actually going to leave the Torie's frozen in 1 more minute. So I use this IKEA rack as a cooling rack. It's my favorite thing. It's so convenient. And if you see how I have my identifiers on the end of the pan, very convenient. So we just leave it here. Let them cool. Well, the other guy will be out in a minute. And then we will look at them in the light, one after another. Woo, that looks good. All right, we're gonna give these 2 seconds and then I'm gonna show you this so we don't burn ourselves. I double sheet the pans to create insulating between the 2 pans. So as it starts to get brown, first of all, the silicone mat gives me some insulation. It starts to get brown, I lower the temperature and I throw that extra pan on there. I know the bottom is not going to continue to darken while the top does and the inside does at a lower temperature. We want long, slow baking to create lots of yummy flavor without overdoing the outside too fast. And the insulating properties of 2 sheet pans is what helps. All right, let's take a look. Woo! Let's take a look at some of our cookies here. All right, so these don't even need cooling racks. So here is the Torie's. So this one is the one I did today. Fresh off the presses. This one came out of the freezer. Remember I said I like when it has a lot of craggy stuff? All right, so let's take a look at this thing. Let's do some comparisons here. I'm gonna lift these puppies up. Okay, so this one is the one that came out of the bowl tonight, and this was the one that came out of the freezer. Do you see the difference in thickness? But this is nice. I think that's really good. You can see I like this cragginess, and that is what happens when you freeze the cookie and the inside slowly melts in the oven. It creates these creases, and it's also from the rest, okay? Here's the bottom. Look at the caramelization. That's not greasy. Well, it's the butter and the fat and the sugar is all getting Maillarded and dried out, and you can even see, look at the holes in there. Look at how beautiful. So this has salt, a little kosher salt, coming out of the bowl, and then this was the one that came out of the freezer, and it just looks different. It's craggier, it's thicker, right? Let's look at the bottom. You can see the caramelization of the edge, and then there's the bottom. Let's compare. Different. A lot of the stuff in this one slid down toward the bottom of the pan because it wasn't hydrated and also it wasn't frozen. All right. So then we'll break this guy in half. It's the inside. High sugar content on this, and I can tell because of those holes. So we'll break it in half. It's chewy in the middle, and then on the edge, there's crunch. I know you could hear that. Oh my God. This is the frozen one. All right. I baked this one nice and long. Do you see that hollowness? That is the high sugar content. I think I baked this one a little long. This has a high sugar content, I told you guys. But I still like it. Like, that's the inside. That's how you can tell the hollowness. That is the nature of the cookie. Even here you can see it on today's. So perhaps, you see that hole? That is high sugar content. But I like how see how it caramelized right there? That's the toffee. Look at the toffee. Oh my gosh. So this works. So those are the Torie's cookies that I just made and that I baked. I love them both. And the Tories I would bake, the one out of the freezer, a little less, so it's not quite as done. But I have two others I did for fun. This is the King Arthur oat cookie. And it is a chocolate chip version. So do you like chocolate chips in your oat cookie or not? You can see I used grains of the oats and they don't disappear. I think they're beautiful. Craggy, this came out of the freezer. I think the top is beautiful. You can see all the cragginess, looks really good. And then the edge tells me, it's just nice. The way that it melted and baked, it's just nice. So then I'll break, oh yeah, soft. King Arthur. And I have to tell you, I personally really like this cookie. You can see oats in there. Chewy, yummy, nice dark color. I mean, I bake that dark and it's still soft and chewy. So if you bake this less, it's really good. Yeah, these cookies are baked a little bit long, but they're still really soft and they taste amazing. That's the whole point. You got to take them all the way at least once. If you like an underbaked cookie, just take it further and see. Give yourself a chance to experience a crunchy, delicious cookie. It's not going to hurt you, and you'll learn so much about flavor. Because you can always go back to underbaking. All right, take care, everyone. Happy baking.